And we're back for another episode of Pursuing the Perfect Pint podcast, episode 16. And this podcast, we're heading back into the US, to Colorado, to learn more about Bierstadt. We have our lager-focused brewer in the US. But before we get to that, Brent, we're 2 weeks away from the conference. And you were saying you're feeling like you might be getting a bit of a complex.
Yeah, we're 2 weeks away from our Lisbon conference, which happens every 2 years. But the complex is kind of building from in 2022, a month before our Antwerp conference. Russia invaded Ukraine, so that caused all kinds of turmoil, and now more or less the same period of time, a month before the Lisbon conference, we've got this U.S.-Israeli Iran thing has popped up. Not that that has any super direct connection, but it certainly has raised energy prices. Crude oil's up, natural gas is up. Many people have learned that the Strait of Hormuz handles about 20% of the world's crude oil and 20% of the liquefied natural gas. So if I brought that back to the industry, that's probably one of the key impacts or influences would be, if it stays prolonged, this conflict, there is this risk of more inflation coming back in, which we don't need. We're trying to address affordability for beer, and what we need is, my wish list would be a calmer period where we can get away from some of these things, but it just seems like we continue to face that. So that's kind of hanging over the market. In fundamental space, the winter crops in Europe look very good, and we've got the spring barley now planted in important places like France under, as someone told me from France, ideal conditions.
That
So
was good.
we see the crop starting to develop, and that'll continue on into the UK and then up into Denmark and so on. So that's always the important thing, Danielle, of course, is if you get the crop planted reasonably on time, it just helps avoid problems in summer. Late crop can sometimes run into hot weather problems. So I think, generally speaking, we're in a pretty good place, and we're just waiting for volumes to turn around, which we keep watching and waiting. But it's been 3 years, so at some point we'll be right. It'll turn around at some point. It just has to.
So what I hope then is that for the next conference, wherever we choose it to be, there's no other global conflicts lurking at the same time.
Yeah. Well, 2 years ago we were in Rome, and I don't think we had any disruptions. So
No, we
someone
did
told
not.
me yesterday, maybe it's a 4-year cycle like the Olympics. But I actually would wish for 4 to 6 years of calmer water, so we can actually try to get back to some level of normalcy.
Absolutely. And then coming back to the UK, as we were talking about, we've been hit by quite a lot of energy prices. It's going to be interesting to hear about from David Griggs.
Okay, so as we look forward to the Lisbon conference, March 24 to 26, back by popular demand, Dr. David Griggs has kindly agreed to be a moderator. So first of all, David, thanks very much for joining us back on stage in Lisbon. It's really glad to have you part of it.
Well, Ben, it's a delight to be back. I'm not sure it's popular demand, but maybe unpopular demand. But anyway, it was a super experience in Rome, and I'm very much looking forward to participating in the Lisbon conference.
Yeah, well, I think you're under maybe crediting your own. The feedback was very good, in all seriousness, and there's lots of important things to talk about, and we'll get into that. But I guess maybe first of all, you've been to several RMI conferences. Is there anything that kind of stands out in your mind as to what you get out of the conference that really helps you and take home with you in terms of your day-to-day work?
Well, I think the first thing is to say just how outstanding the RMI conferences are. I mean, it's a huge amount of work for the team to pull them together every 2 years, and it's astonishing that you can do it. It's great to connect, former colleagues, good friends, from across the supply base, from the barley breeders right through to our customers. And that's part of the conference, but of course, also the information flow is really important. I mean, every conference I've been to, I've learned something. And I'm really looking forward to what I'm going to learn in Lisbon.
Yeah. Well, we certainly hope you learn something from it, but probably more importantly as well, you're going to get us started. So you're on tap to be the moderator for the opening session on Wednesday morning. So you're gonna get us flying off on a good start. It's a difficult time, which we've talked about often, and and it's important that we get together. And there's some really big topics that we need to get on the table, and you're going to help us drive that. But it's really important. As we said, till times we need to get together and talk about these things to build that resiliency for 2035, as the theme is the decade ahead. We have to forge ahead, and looking forward to you being part of that. So get rested up. We're going to need you on your top of your game, and thanks again for taking a few minutes to share some of your thoughts, and really looking forward to seeing you in Lisbon.
Super. Pleasure. And I look forward to seeing everybody in Lisbon. Can't wait.
Cheers.
I think David's seen also quite a few RMI conferences, Brent.
Yeah, he was a moderator in Rome, and I guess I would give him the compliment that he's back by popular demand. So the feedback was really good. People really liked the way he handled the conversation, and the insights that he could add to the conversation, which is really good when you got someone who's got the technical background like David and been to a few of these events. So he knows what the audience is looking for, and he knows the important topics, of course. So he's kind of a perfect moderator for what we're doing. So it's another big thank you for people like David that get up on stage. I like to have people from the industry up there as moderators. They get a chance to be in front of people. We could do it ourselves, or we could hire some nondescript person to be a professional host. But for me, I like it being someone from within the industry that people know or can get to know. I think that's the most powerful thing as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. And I think moving on from the UK then back to Colorado to Bierstadt Lagerhaus with Ashleigh Carter. And what a fascinating conversation this is.
Okay. Well, this week for the Pursuing the Perfect Pint podcast, we're going back virtually. We're going back to Denver. So we're back, and we've reconnected here with Ashleigh from Bierstadt. Some of you would already know that we hosted our North American Summit. Our Barrel Connections event was held at Bierstadt in June of 2025. As I was just saying to Ashleigh as we were preparing, it was maybe the hottest day I've ever experienced in Denver. It was 101 degrees, which made the beer taste good, but it was a long time to survive. But that's for another part of the discussion. First of all, Ashleigh, thanks for taking some time. And looking forward to maybe catching up in a little bit more around what you're seeing. But first of all, a big thank you.
No, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here. It's a beautiful day in Denver today. Not quite 101, but not quite cold enough either. So
yeah. Always lots of sunshine in Denver, so at least you get your vitamin D, and that's great. Maybe Ashleigh, a little bit. Maybe what keeps you busy day to day in your role at Bierstadt, and how long have you been with the company?
well, I had I started the company with my husband and my business partner Chris. We actually got in this building in 2014, so it's been a minute. We actually opened the brewery though in 2016. Actually made our first beer in June of 2016. So, been here day to day. I do all the stuff in the brewery. My business partners kind of take care of the front of house and some of the more minutia things there, but anything brewery wise, ingredients, schedule, staffing, what we're going to make, all that stuff falls kind of to me. Plus some silly paperwork stuff, which I try not to do, but I have to do once in a while. So yeah, I've been here since the very beginning. This is kind of a concept that came out of my husband and I's head. And then our business partner, Chris, he really has done a great job rounding out some of the other more entertaining things here. I get to sit around and drink a bunch of beers and talk shit, but apparently some people need a little bit more than that. So he's done a really good job engaging. Figure.
Yeah. So this is your 10th anniversary from startup, from the actual fire up of the brewery. So are you having a celebration?
We will. Our actual anniversary is not till August, so we'll start planning that now. But we always do what's called, it's so funny. We call it the Brew-niversary. And it's just the anniversary of the first day we brewed, which is, I want to say June 12th. Sounds right. And we do like some silly liters of pills. We don't do that on a regular basis, so it's the only day a year you can get a liter of pills.
Yeah, so a little bit of a German Oktoberfest style enjoyment.
Yes,
so,
of a pill. So
yeah, so you're you're a beer lover, so I guess that was the draw to you to get involved in brewing. That's something that you had obviously had a passion for. So where did that develop?
Yeah, I started professionally brewing. This will actually be my 15th anniversary professionally brewing just in a month or so. I got my degree in pure mathematics in college, and I played Division I soccer. So it's kind of always been in my wheelhouse to have multiple. I could never just like be an athlete. I could never just like be sciencey, mathy. I kind of had to have both things working together. So when I kind of didn't know what I wanted to do, I thought about grad school for math, but I had a pretty big soccer injury, so I had to take some time off after college. I kind of got into coaching, and that was harder than I thought it was going to be. Just a lot of talking to 15-year-old girls on the phone about recruiting and stuff like that. And I was lucky enough, I grew up here in Colorado. I went to college in North Carolina. I coached soccer in Michigan. And all of these places have really excellent craft beer, groups basically, or not groups, but, breweries. They're one of the first places that had a bunch of breweries, especially microbreweries or craft breweries around them. You have Bell's and Founders up in Michigan. In Asheville is just a small, cool place that has a bunch of fun, Wicked Weed and stuff like that. We're starting to get going. And then here in Colorado, obviously, we have, Odell and New Belgium and things like that. So I kind of grew up. I just turned 41. So I grew up basically around craft beer. And so when we weren't, drinking Busch Light, we were trying some of the other things. That was an interesting thing for us to do in college, is go to the local craft brewery and play trivia and drink beer. And I kind of grew up with it here in Colorado. And my parents, we had Old Chicago's, which have a bunch of different beers. So I was familiar with craft beer, unlike maybe the generation before me, which maybe wasn't as familiar with craft beer because it wasn't as prolific. So I just started looking at it, and I was like, oh, the science behind this is kind of cool. And I moved back to Colorado. I started home brewing and quickly realized that was not for me. There's no control over anything, and I'm kind of a control freak. So I just kind of started volunteering at a local brewery that I really like the beer here, called Dry Dock, which is no longer exists as it once did, but still is a brewery down here in Aurora, over kind of like where my dad lives, where I basically grew up. So that's kind of how I got into it. And as soon as I was doing it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Beer's delicious. Like, I love drinking beer. It's got science and math and problem solving, which I like. And, I get to be on my feet doing things during the day. It's not a sedentary job. So all those things are kind of what got me into brewing in general. But I quickly realized that I wasn't meant to be working for anybody. I'm not a good rule follower.
Better to be your own boss, I guess.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it insubordination, but I would say that I like to do things my own way, and I don't like being told what to do.
Yeah. So 10 years into the journey. So thanks for sharing that. Maybe just building off that, what do you think is different now than when you got started, say in June of 2016 to now? What has changed from maybe what you saw as you first got established as Bierstadt, and where to say we've been through the pandemic and all these things, which are obvious, but what is as you expected, or what is different than you expected when you stepped off and got into this running your own business? What are the things that you look back most fondly of, and what are the things that are still headaches?
Yeah, I think, beer wise, not that much has changed. I feel like in some ways, we as a craft brewery, and I don't know that I love that terminology. Like, we've kind of been ahead of the curve, just basically doing one thing and one thing only, right? Like, a lot of breweries that started out doing one thing are doing entirely different things. And in 10 years, I can tell you, I haven't changed really a single thing that we've done. Maybe we've honed in processes, or I've made some slightly different styles, but they're all within the realm of what we started doing. And so in that way, I don't think much has changed. I think economically things have changed. Obviously, pandemic was part of that. Kind of what's going on with tariffs right now is part of that. And then also, uh, just kind of, not to get too political, but just the idea of corporations and conglomerations taking over things, and getting tax breaks and stuff, where small businesses don't have the ability to necessarily get that. So it's hard running a small business in that way, because we're here working it every day. There's not some corporation above us. Like, me and my two business partners, Bill and Chris, we're here every day, and we work here every day. Like, the money's not going somewhere else. And so that can be pretty tough. Just as, managing people is probably one of the harder things that we do around here. Not as much in the brewery. Uh, my guys are pretty easy. But from other, employment
Yeah, but
stats and
yes,
stuff like that.
yeah, the sales facing people and interaction with customers, I guess, is a lot of work.
It's not just that. It's just the way that kind of the world is changing, and I think it's for a good reason. We have a very high minimum wage here in Colorado, and I think that that just kind of there's kind of a reckoning and a reassessment in the restaurants. We have a full restaurant too. Reckoning coming in the restaurant industry, how it's been a lot of unpaid labor and how front of house tipping and things of that nature. So we're just kind of at a weird crossroads with that. And we decided during the pandemic to completely change the way we were going to run our front of house model. And I think it's for the better, but it doesn't make it not difficult to be kind of the first. I wouldn't say we're the first people at all to change our business model and to change our tipping model, but I do think that it's hard to relay to the customers all the time what that actually means and what they're actually paying for when they're used to a very specific model that still exists in most places. So I think that's been a little bit of some of the tougher things that we've encountered. Yeah. So from, a beer perspective, though, I think that the kind of beer we make is, well, it's on a 150-year winning streak. We make lager, so it's not too far to get new customers to want to drink what we have. And so from that perspective, we're doing as well as we've been doing. And we started canning about 5 years ago, which I didn't really want to do, but that was kind of a necessity out of the pandemic. But I'm very happy with the quality of our beer in a package.
Well, we often say, Ashley, when you brew lagers, there's nowhere to hide. You have to be on top of your process. You have to really deliver because consumers can pick up anything that's not 100% there. So just when you talked about the changing model and so on, I guess for anyone that if they haven't been there, we would recommend go to Bierstadt. The facility is very unique in the sense that you've got a very large area. I would call it your serving area, but it's more like a small gymnasium in a way. And I guess your business partner Chris talked a lot about all the efforts that you've been doing to try to bring people back in on premise, which has been hard work. And I guess one thing is you've got the space. I guess you try a lot of creative things to attract people. How's that going? Are you seeing any progress in getting people back on premise, or is it still a struggle?
It's still a struggle. I would say it's happening. But I think it's tough because just there's a lot of misconceptions about we're in downtown Denver. There's a lot of misconceptions, I think, that people are scared of coming down here, which is silly to me. And I think unfortunately we are kind of in a landlord problems around town is that they would rather be empty or vacant than have a business in there. And I think, that's something we're very much struggling with. And so there's a lot of vacancy. And obviously people haven't come back to work, which is great. You know what I mean? Like there's no reason why you should necessarily have to be in the office. If you don't have a job that requires that. So I think some of that's like tough and there's just there's just people have less money at the moment. But we've been doing a lot with parties, booking parties. We do have a very large space. We have a lot of different spaces you can hold individual parties. You have your own bars and stuff like that. And that's been working really well for us. But just coming out of the winter time is always what it is, a little bit. So.
And when we were there, they were constructing the new outdoor patio, so that that'll get some activity here pretty soon as the weather warms up as well. So I guess that's part of everything. You're just trying to create enough kind of occasion and experience ideas for consumers, and hopefully there's some kind of magnetism that comes with that pulls them in because you've got the beer ready to go. So I guess you just need the people
need more people. I mean, we can always use more people. It's just, beer is one of the very interesting things. And I think especially the beer we make, being mostly lagers or lower alcohol for the most part, it just lends itself to, conversation. And it's kind of like the model when you're in Germany and Europe and stuff like that is, you're kind of doing it for the afternoon and you're not really getting like, too intoxicated or anything, but it's just kind of the lubrication to basically talk and celebrate or commiserate or anything like that. It's kind of the background. Socialize,
yeah,
exactly.
Socializing, yeah.
So getting people out to socialize is, I think, can be difficult with, we all have a cell phone, and the pandemic, I think, really hurt we talk about Gen Z a lot and how they're not drinking, and I have a few theories about why I think that is. But I think one of them is just, a lot of their social interaction because of the pandemic just happened on their phones, and so it's a chore to get them out a little bit.
Yeah, and it's proving to be much more difficult and longer to see whether we can actually get them to come back, because they might be quite happy with kind of where they've gravitated to. So the another thing that stuck before I forget, the also came from Chris, was you do need to offer a much wider portfolio of products, not necessarily that you produce them all yourselves. I guess you bring in some partner products or non-alcohol, or how do you kind of get to where you offer the fullest portfolio as possible, not knowing necessarily what consumers want, but you have to try to have something for everyone? Is that another layer of complexity that is a headache? Or
I think in our situation, it's a little bit easier. We've always operated as a full brew pub. So we've had the ability to, like, because we have food, the laws here in Colorado, because we have food in our brew pub, we are allowed to offer those things inherently. If you're just a brewery with a tasting room, you can't bring in some of that stuff. So for me, it's nice because I can focus on the things that I want to do. And if we want to bring something in there, I don't feel obligated to make something I'm not comfortable with, right? Like I don't feel obligated to like try to make NA or to try to make any of these things when we can just purchase them from someone else. Whereas not everybody has that ability. I think it's the fine line, or maybe the hardest thing is to be very set on what you're doing and to not let the main priority, which is beer, uh, get too washed away in offering too many things. So being very deliberate in the things you're offering. So we have, one scotch, one bourbon, one vodka, one rum. Like we don't have like a variety of those things. And we have just some set cocktails and plain mixers. Plus we have always had cider on tap. And then again, the NA stuff, just trying to partner with people that we think are doing a good job at it. So I think it could be really specific and really pointed at what you want to offer. And I think that helps, not just scattering around too much.
sure, and you're a brewery, so you're beer centric by nature. So you
Correct.
wanna keep that front of mind, but having some alternatives for, let's say, the minority of the customer base, so you can pull more people in.
It's
Which
great. Yeah.
makes
You get a big party of people, of all age groups, and they can come sit and enjoy, and there is something for everyone. So I just think it's being very specific about what you're offering and having choice, but not letting that choice at some point you're going to be like, we don't carry Diet Coke. You know what I mean? Like you can't just carry it because one person a month asks for it. But we can offer real soda, from a local company. We can offer, like things that have crossover, like a Radler. So we use like the Pellegrino for our Radler, so you can sell that on its own. Same with orange juice and things of that nature. So you can keep a large portfolio without having to cater to every single need.
Yeah, yeah. I guess maybe if you could, Ashley, your view, what's your general sense for the health of the wider brewing community in your neighborhood? So let's just talk about Denver specifically. Do you feel that it's doing reasonably well, or how would you like? How's the patient? If you had to put it in a few words.
I think it's tough. It's tough. And it's for a lot. I don't think there's any one specific reason. I do think, specifically here in Denver, just the cost of operating. We're not in LA and we're not in New York City. We don't have the number of people to kind of warrant some of the cost of things. We did have an increase in minimum wage, which is excellent. I'm super pumped about that. But then you see all the lease and, renting increase, and it just kind of bites into that. I think that it's just not the same. And we're just trying to figure out what that means, if it's more of an economic trend or if it's specifically a beer trend. And I don't believe it's specifically a beer trend. I've always thought that there's a certain number of breweries that are going to have to close, that will never get to be more than 10 or 15% of what's consumed. And I think that's natural and normal, for any sort of craft thing, right? Like how much Velveeta is consumed compared to how much Gruyere is consumed. It's just going to be the nature of it. There's a time and a place and a cost associated with that. So I think beer wise, it's just getting people to get out and come and consume them. But I think it's
Yeah,
just kind of tough out there right now. There's a lot of, like I said, political things that are happening that make it tough for people to have a lot of,
yeah, yeah, and I would say market related as well. I think I often talk about, I think beer has some affordability problems associated. It was of no one's design, but we had the pandemic, and right after that, we had the biggest crop failure in the barley crop in North America in 2021. That passed through a lot of cost, which was a really was never a good time, but it was actually really poor timing because it was coming on right on the back of the pandemic. And you mentioned it, touched on it earlier. You've got tariffs and the impact on aluminum and these things. So there are some things that are very specific to beer that we would hope maybe over time, is a bit to your point, that they would normalize and we could get back to maybe a better cost structure relative to the overall market. And in time, if people have more disposable income, beer can actually move up a little bit higher in their choice priority list, and we can see that return. But I think I'm with you on that. I think a lot of it's more situational, and these economic things have just taken too much money out of people's pockets, and everyone has to make decisions. So
Yeah,
I'm hoping that's a turnaround
I hope it's a
possible.
turnaround too. I've always been a big proponent here about keeping beer affordable. I think you'll sell more beer. There's a number, right? There's some number there where people don't buy 3 beers, right? And you're losing out money because they don't buy 3 beers because those 2 beers were too expensive, right? There's a part where they get a third beer, and that is more money. So it's always trying to keep beer affordable here, is one of my biggest priorities. It's definitely tough though. When I see my chemicals went up another 10%, another 20%, and then I have a tariff charge on top of that, and you're like, well, even the malt, expensive to me, expensive malt is still okay. It's just one of the pieces, but you know, we have a pretty good process here. That's as far as ingredients goes, that's one of our least expensive ingredients, compared to hops, or compared to, again, like just something like chemical, like where you're more tanks and you're putting it down the drain and all sorts of things like that. So keeping beer affordable has been on the forefront of our list, and we just took a price increase in January for our off-premise stuff. And it's still amazing to me how many, I don't want to slag some bars and restaurants too much, but how much they're charging for the beer that we're giving them, and how they're making it kind of unaffordable at restaurants. If you see a beer that's $12 and a cocktail that's 15, like, you're blurring the line too much. I might as well just get a cocktail. So I think we need to really examine that margin that bars are continuously charging. It's hard to blame them. Again, I think one of our biggest expenses here is rent, and so it's hard to blame them. But it does make it hard to go out and want to drink more than one beer, when you're going to pay $50 for 4 beers.
Yeah, it's the cumulative effect. You start adding all those things together, and you get to your $12 beer example, right? It's just but maybe more reason for people to come back on premise. I guess that would be one way to because you can find something much more affordable. Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done in that space. Beer style wise, you do a lot of lagers.
We only do lagers.
Only do
We
lagers,
only make
so
lagers.
that's maybe why I like Bierstadt so much, because it's right in my style. Um, Elsewhere, we talk a bit around or hear about the IPA phase seems to be kind of not going away, but it does seem to be fading a little bit, and maybe that works in your favor because you do see consumer trends back toward more easy drinking, maybe lower, of course, lower ABV, which comes with most lagers and pills. So, is that a trend that you think is continuing?
I think the IPA, of course, is going to be a part of beer. I think lagers are always just going to be the number one, as far as maybe not craft goes, but as far as consumers go. I think that's kind of the place where we can bridge some of the big breweries, the macro compared to us. I think IPA race will settle down. I've already seen it settle down a little bit, even with the hazy IPA, them just becoming more drinkable. And I think it kind of just comes down, whether it's IPA or whether it's sour beer or whether it's whatever, it comes down to drinkability. It comes down to wanting to drink more than one of them. And I think that's going to really drive, and wasn't really initially the main driver of our market. Our market was to be the opposite, 180 degrees away from macro lager is really, we're seeing that is becoming more of a drive for every style.
Yeah. Remind me, you do have an amber, right? What's the name
We
of
have a
that?
dunkel, yeah. So dunkel just
Dunkel. Yeah.
means dark. It's just the opposite, not opposite. It's the dark version of Helles. So yeah, we have all different colors of beer. People often are um, confused, but it's because I think we weirdly have a lack of beer education, which is always crazy to me. You know, people know the difference between a white wine glass and a red wine glass and a champagne glass, but they don't know that lagers can also be dark and then pilsners are lagers and that all of these things, lagers isn't one thing, you know, and I think there's a lot more to it than the general consumer understands.
Yeah. Well, I like the maltiness of your dunkel. So I guess if I maybe as we kind of transition, my favorite pint when we were at your establishment was the dunkel, but that's just my personal flavor because I do like the maltiness that comes with it. But maybe to throw the question back to you, Ashley, because we're called the Pursuing the Perfect Pint podcast. In your mind, what does the perfect pint look like? That can be beer style or occasion or the people you're sharing with. But what does a perfect pint look like for Ashley?
Ah, well, that's funny. You guys are perfect pint, but I would say perfect half liter. You know, we're metric boys over here. But the perfect pint to me, uh, always is something that somebody is cared about. I would say, like in general, it's for me, it's Helles here. Liter Helles with my friends, talking shit, drinking lager, hot tea, cold lager. You know, like I love just talking about everything and having a beer and not really thinking about it. But I just ones that are consumed with friends for any reason. Doesn't have to be any specific reason. Just one that kind of goes away in the background. It's not that specific, but there's plenty of occasions I've had plenty of amazing beer experiences in my life, but I can tell you every single one of them has been with somebody that I care about, whether it's a good friend or my husband or uh, my mom or my dad or, any of those things. It's always consumed with somebody, whether
Yep.
it's on
It's
draft
not
or not. I prefer it on draft, but I've had
of
plenty of
course. Yeah.
plenty of, 40-ounce Ballenas in Mexico with some of my best friends, consuming fish tacos, straight from the seas. It's
Yeah.
always with friends though.
It's always about socializing. I think that's the key. That's the key part of it. And you touched on it a couple of times. So thanks for that, Ashley. I think it's been really good to catch up and hear your story. If we get back in the area, we'll definitely stop in. We would recommend to anyone if they're in Denver, they need to stop by Bierstadt and enjoy some of the brewed with love lagers and we'll spread the word. But thanks again for taking some time and sharing kind of your views on how things look.
Yeah,
Much
thank you so
appreciated.
much for coming, and I'm glad you like the Dunkel. It's kind of our sleeper. We basically only make 3 beers year round: Pils, Helles, and Dunkel. And so I've talked about once or twice mm, just doing a rotating dark lager, but every time I think about that, it's a bad idea. So
Just
Dunkel's great.
just stick with it.
Yes, so we'll do.
You say don't if it's not broke, don't fix
If
it.
it's not broke,
So
don't fix it. Yes.
good. All the best. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, thank you so
Ashley.
much.
Wow, that was fascinating, Brent. I think Colorado seems to be at ahead of quite a lot of the trends. I mean, the changes and the challenges around pay and hospitality, I think was really interesting and trying to shift that consumer mindset.
Yeah, and as we kind of touched on, we had spent some time there when we did our event in Denver, got to know them, got to know their beers, of course. I think they're a good example. I don't imagine the story is any different on the West Coast or in the Northeast. I think brewers in general are dealing with these challenges, but it was really good to hear from Ashley that there are challenges, and she wasn't shy about mentioning it. I don't think we wanted everyone to tell us things are great when they're not. So really appreciated her openness to say, it's been a struggle, and probably some people will not survive just because it's been a prolonged downturn. So, but lager focused, I thought that's an interesting
Yes.
story, and um, I called it an amber, but it was a dunkel. But either way, it's kind of in my wheelhouse. If I could find an amber slash dunkel lager that has more malt, so I'm supporting the industry and comes along with a nice flavor package as well. So they do some great stuff. I would recommend people if you get to Denver. There's now a couple people we've caught up with in Denver, and dozens more. So yeah, it's a nice little hotspot for beer.
She did make me smile, Brent. That's the bit you need to sort of clip out for the maltsters to say, oh no, malt's not that expensive. So they will take that as the pricing
Yeah,
strategy for
well,
next year.
and we took, like, and I was glad you mentioned it, aluminum and some of these things, and we talked very briefly about it, and maybe some of that was after we stopped recording. But beer, more than anything, beer got hit with a lot of inflation, and maybe more. Like, I don't think the bottle that's used to fill for wine didn't have the same impacts, but for sure malts went up in 2022. Aluminum was up through the roof. So beer particularly, and that's part of the lingering problem that we have, is that inflation has all passed into beer pricing, and consumers are watching where and what they spend their money on. So I think would be nice for calmer days, maybe get prices to stabilize, and we can kind of get a recovery behind beer.
Yeah. And I think if you're still pursuing the perfect pint, I love the fact that Ashleigh said she had to move on from homebrew because there wasn't enough control. And we all know how hard it is to make a good lager. So if you're looking for the perfect pint, head to Bierstadt Lagerhaus.
Yeah, for sure. Like, if go back and look at, if you watched it, watch it again. When I said, there's no place to hide behind a lager, there was a smile on her face, because
Yes.
that's kind of sometimes unspoken, but you have to be on top of your brewing process if you're brewing lagers, and that's all they do, and they do it well. And I think she totally agreed with me. Even I just tell by the smile on her face that she knew that was important, and that's what she spends her time on. So yeah, check out Bierstadt, Denver. Highly recommend it.
And see you next week, Brent, for another episode of
Stay
Pursuing
tuned.
the Perfect.
We're going to head across to Europe next week, so we're going to keep moving around the globe, shedding light on the malt supply chain, brewing, and distilling.
Brilliant. Cheers.
Cheers.